This is In the Trenches, broadcast 70.
Welcome to In the Trenches, where entrepreneurs, artists, writers, designers, inventors, warriors, and leaders share their stories of doing the hard, creative work that impacts all of our lives. Let the journey inspire you to do something worthwhile, build something bold, and create your life's work. And now, your host, Tom Morkis.
Everyone, Tom Morkis here, and really excited to have on the call today Honoree Corder, who is the best-selling author of Prosperity for Writers, and also someone who I came across on another podcast talking about some of the work she'd done in the publishing world, from doing really creative things like white labeling books to hustling bulk book orders. She's done some really kind of, when I heard it, I was like, it was super impressed. And I was like, okay, I got to get her on the podcast. I got to get her on the show so I can talk to her and dig into these topics about how she's able to do what she's able to do in the publishing landscape. So Honoree, thank you so much for being on the call with us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a bit about you and your background.
Sure. So I do three main things besides being a wife and mom. I write books, I speak, and I have different ways that I speak. So keynote speeches and training, motivational speeches, and I coach executives on how to, my tagline is double their income and triple their time off, but there's so much more to the coaching than that. But those are the three basic things that I do right now. That keeps me off the streets and out of trouble.
That's good. I love that slogan too. I mean, you can't argue with that.
No, not at all.
Where do I sign up?
Yes. We'll talk after the call.
Cool. Okay. So now, I guess let's go back even a little bit further. So tell us, how'd you get into this world of writing, of self-publishing, of publishing and stuff like that, like some of the work you've been doing in that space?
Well, I was told to write a book by Mark Victor Hansen, who's the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Mm-hmm. And when I met him, I was very proud to say, when he asked me what I did, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a coach and a speaker. And he just was not impressed. He said, okay, well, everybody's a coach and a speaker. What you really need to do is write a book. And okay. Right.
Yeah.
And my first thought, I high on the snark and the sarcasm department. And so my first thought was, what could go wrong? How hard could that be? Right.
Yep.
I'll just write the book. But he gave me some thoughts and some guidance, which got me started. And so I self-published my first book. And the backstory to that, very briefly, is that I was very good friends with a famous author, and he said, let's go to New York and let's see if we can get you a book deal. And I got a book deal, but I didn't sign it because the terms just were not favorable. I'm a businesswoman, and the terms were not favorable. And so when I looked into what the actual tasks items were for self-publishing a book, I realized that I could afford to do those things myself. I could hire an editor, I could hire a graphic designer, I could hire a layout person, and I could print the book. And it would cost me a few $1,000s to do that, but then all of the profit would remain with me. Whereas with traditional publishing, all of the profit would remain with the publishing house, right? The house always wins, and the publishing house is no different. And so that's how I landed in self-publishing. And this was in 2005 when a self-published author also wore a scarlet letter. It was not the cool, in vogue, trendy thing to do at the time. It was very uncool.
Yeah.
But I did it, and I kept all the money, so I was okay with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that process. So, you're because it was a little bit ago, and definitely, like you said, it wasn't in vogue. So what was the process like for you when you first learned how to self-publish?
Well, it was a very steep learning curve. I didn't know to hire editors at first, right? You just write it and publish it, and that's how it is. And so a lot of people do that, or they try to self-edit, and I advise against that. This author that I was friends with, he did give me his graphic design person and referred me to him. And so I was able to get a quality cover and quality layout, which caused people to stop for a second and go, wait a minute, it doesn't say Random House on the spine. So who published this? Right? There was a question. And I think that was good, because a lot of times you can tell a self-published book. And if you can tell that it's self-published, then it's not professional looking enough and you need to do it again, in my opinion. You don't want people to wonder. And ultimately, readers who read a good book don't care who published it. But if it doesn't look quite right, then they won't buy it, even if the stuff inside is amazing. So you want to you want to put your best book forward. You want to put your best book cover forward.
Totally. So which was this book, by the way? Is this the one that started it all for you then?
Tall Order.
Okay. And then you went on to write a series of books, correct?
I did.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I was watching an Oprah show, and Oprah was doing this makeover of this single mom. And I, at the time, was an engaged to get remarried single mom. And she was basically, the before picture of this poor woman was, and you can picture this as I describe her: frizzy hair, oversized, she's wearing a 2XL t-shirt, and she's probably 5'5", and she's wearing oversized sweats. I mean, it was just a sad before picture. And Oprah was basically saying, this is what single moms look like. This poor woman. Yes, all single moms look like this. And I was like, I don't look like that. Why do single moms have to look like that? And so I went looking for the guide for single moms on how to, and this is the subtitle of the book, get their life back and their game on. And I recognized that there were books for single moms, but nothing that kind of fit right into that particular piece of the pie. Like, how do you go through death, divorce, or just finding yourself a single mom and still feel great about yourself? Because there's a societal stigma for single moms still to this day. And so that was the inspiration for the Successful Single Mom original book. And now there are 6 books in that series, because what I did was tackle the problems that single moms face. So their kids want to eat every day, but you're a single mom, you're working, and you're trying to keep everything together. So how do you put a hot meal, a good, delicious, nutritious hot meal on the stove? How do you make money? How do you find love again? How do you stay in shape? And if you need to go back to school so that you can make more money, how do you get an education? So those are the 6 books in that series. And then for good measure, I wrote The Successful Single Dad on request.
Nice. Okay. So obviously you didn't write these all at once, correct? You did one at a time, right?
I did one at a time.
So tell me a little bit about that first one. And because the assumption here is that if you wrote 6, then the first one obviously did well enough, right, to encourage more and encourage the series. So I'm curious about, how did you get traction with that first book?
Well, what's interesting is when I published that book, I hired a publicist, and I was just on a coach call with a client before our conversation, and she was asking me if I had ever hired a publicist. And I said, that was the 20 grand I should have lit on fire because my hands were cold, right? It was the worst money I ever spent on a book. I thought that The Successful Single Mom, that was the book. I just had a feeling in my gut that it was a book that would help a lot of people, would help a lot of single moms. And I didn't get traction with it right away. Now, keep in mind, this is 2009. This is before Facebook was commonplace. There wasn't really Twitter as a daily activity, Instagram, Pinterest, none of those platforms were available. And so for a self-published author to gain traction, it really was word of mouth. And when I published the book, I did not have that. It wasn't for another couple of years that I noticed that the sales were steady and steadily increasing. It was like watching grass grow, but it was growing. And so I had written The Successful Single Mom and then The Successful Single Mom Cooks Cookbook within 6 months of each other. But then I had spent all this money on promoting the book with a publicist. And as I say, no, not even a cricket came to my party, right? Usually in the silence, you can hear a cricket. I was like, the crickets were not even coming to this party.
Yep.
And so I kind of just thought, oh, my intuition on this book was wrong. I made a mistake. Okay, I'm just going to leave it out there. And I got back to coaching and speaking. What I didn't realize at the time, and I think this will be helpful for your audience, is that it takes longer than you want it to, costs more than you'd like it to, and takes more patience than you want to have. But it does happen. And so what was interesting was, because it was growing over time. And then people started reaching out to me, professionals started reaching out to me and saying, could I buy 25 copies of this book? Do you have a bulk discount? Could I buy 100 copies? How about 500 copies? I think this would be good for me to promote my business. Can I put my information on the back cover? Could I do a special printing of this book and use it as a marketing tool for my business? And so that actually opened a whole different sub business within my business.
So okay, so this is what I'm really curious about. So like, so take me through that piece right there. How'd you? I guess how did they find you, or did you find them?
They found me.
Okay, and how did they find you? Like, what was an effective way? How did they find you? I'm just curious back then, especially.
Well, so the book was selling on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Amazon has a reach into places I can't even imagine. And so as people were buying the book, they started, I guess, thinking about what they would use the book for. So the very first person who reached out to me just said, I would like to buy this in bulk, but then they kept buying more copies. And then eventually it was, could I put my name on here somewhere just so I don't have to put my business card in that could fall out?
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the beginning of that process. Although I had done some white labeling of tall order. So I don't have to, I have this deal with the universe, right? Hit me with the feather a couple of times. You don't have to throw a brick at me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was listening to the messages I was getting. And I thought, oh, if people want to buy bulk of this book and bulk of this book, and they're not related in any way, maybe people would buy books in bulk.
So, okay. So yeah, so they find you, which is pretty remarkable. And then they reach out to you and they want to buy in bulk. Why, what was the, and because I'm curious how this might be able to cross apply to other people's books who are maybe in the nonfiction business space to a degree, specifically, but because the white labeling I find very fascinating. Why would somebody want to put their name on your book?
Because they don't have to create content. People want to have a book, and they also feel overwhelmed by the process of writing a book. What am I going to say in my book? What difference does it make if I write a book? And so when people could attach their name to my book, and here's why I think that it's become so popular, is because a book is evergreen.
Yep.
When you're done with a book, do you throw it in the trash?
No, I put it on my bookshelf if it's good.
But what if I said, when you're done with a book, just throw it away?
Yeah, I'd cry at least a single tear.
You'd cry, exactly, right? Most people are horrified at the thought of just throwing a book.
Yeah, exactly.
So a book becomes an evergreen marketing piece. A business card, a flyer, a brochure, all pieces of trash waiting to happen, all eventual landfill, everybody. Right? But a book, when I'm done with it, if it applies, like for example, I just got the new Steve Jobs biography. And I got it because I thought this would be a great giveaway. And then I got Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I got it in hardcover. Also, a great giveaway. I got the book Ask by Ryan Levesque, reading all of them. And then I'm going to give them away, right? I wouldn't just throw them in the trash. I probably might even put them in a community bookshelf if I didn't have something else in mind for the book, but I wouldn't throw it away. But when you're a single mom, you know other single moms. So you read this book or you go through a divorce. I have a book, If Divorce is a Game, These Are the Rules. And that's really popular with divorce attorneys because they put their information on the back because someone goes through a divorce. Well, there's something called the divorce flu. And so you may notice that there's an age where people go through divorce. It's between like 35 and 55 generally, right? But it comes in rashes. Like you'll notice that we went through a divorce and then the next person and the next person. So what the divorce attorneys are finding is that this book gets read by the first person and then their neighbor is going through a divorce. So like, you went through a divorce. Who did you use in your divorce? Oh, I used this divorce attorney. He gave me this book. So here's this book, and they pass it on.
Interesting. Okay.
So when people are publishing a book, if nonfiction, I don't know how this would ever apply to fiction, to be honest with you.
Right.
But if someone's publishing a nonfiction book and they have a platform and they have content, which is content, right? They have content, they have information. They have to ask themselves the question, who would benefit from sharing this content? How could someone use this as a marketing piece? So my tall order book was, how to double your time and your success, right? So the people that were buying it in bulk were people who had sales forces or middle management, lots of people in their middle management. So they wanted to motivate them. How do I motivate people to take action? Oh, I'll give them Honoree's book as a gift from the company. It doesn't cost them very much, but the return on investment can be high. The single mom book is used by certified divorce financial advisors and divorce attorneys. The divorce book, same thing, right? They're using it to get out information that would be helpful to their potential clients. And what they're doing is showing that they care about the person who is the end reader. So everybody wins.
Yeah. Okay. So I see that. I'm still trying to see where I could potentially leverage the same technique,
Sure.
of course,
Sure.
and how others could do it too. Those ones seem relatively clear. I mean, to a degree at least. I definitely get the the lawyer one. That definitely makes sense to me. I like as soon as you described that, I immediately understood it. So I'm curious though, like two things. One is, does this water down your brand at all if you're putting other people's names on it?
Well, no, because they don't get any of the book. They're not getting the front, the spine, or the inside of the book. They are only allowed to design the back cover. And it basically says this book compliments of Tom Works
Mm-hmm.
and all about your business. And it's like a business card that keeps giving. But no, it
Yeah.
doesn't water down my brand. They're basically paying me to distribute my content to people who may want to buy more of my content.
Yep. And then so my question to you then, like as a follow up to that, would you ever, if somebody were able to, somebody ever requested this of a person who's again writing maybe specifically in the business nonfiction space, said, hey, a company comes to them or a corporation or something like that wants to buy in bulk, would there ever be a reason to say no to this? Like in your opinion?
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Right.
I would say no if they wanted to change the content, but if they wanted to order 10, 20, 30, 50,000 copies of my book, like, and they said, Honoree will only do it if you wear a purple hat on Tuesdays, I'd say, okay. Like, I'm having a
Exactly.
hard time trying to figure out a reason why.
Yeah.
If
It's
they were not in alignment, and here's the thing is there are some divorce attorneys that are litigation focused. They want to, if we're married and we're getting a divorce, they want me to beat the crap out of you. And they want us to be in litigation as long as possible because it makes them the most amount of money. I'm collaborative win-win by nature. So those litigation attorneys don't like my book because my book
Yep.
basically says, let your attorney do their job. You turn your focus on the future. Forgive your ex for their transgressions. Forgive yourself for your transgressions and get on with your day. Like create a new vision,
Yep.
right? Which is different from, I think you guys need to argue over that wagon wheel coffee table for the next 15 years.
Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so good stuff.
So if they came to me and they said, we want you to change your message to be against your values, I would say no.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's no amount of money that would change that.
Of
Because
course.
I stand very firm in my messaging and empowering people. So if someone came to me and said, I just want you to say that when you're divorcing, you should stay in litigation for 20 years, I would say I don't agree with that.
Yep. Exactly. Okay, and that makes sense. I think that's an important clarification to a degree. And primarily not like insofar as like when you would say no per se, but I was just wondering like is there any general rule of thumb in terms of ever saying no? But the bottom line, it sounds like again, as long as like the values align and it makes sense in the construct of your values and theirs and stuff like that, then I don't see a negative to it. Like might as well, right?
Might as well.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yes.
So now my question is, how do you, if I'm hearing this, how do I go and do this? How do I make this happen? Because what if I think, okay, nobody's going to find me. I've just written this book. How do I go and actually maybe actively, like proactively?
Sure. So the first time I was lucky. I don't rely on luck.
Yep.
I will be honest with you. So I have a very specific marketing outreach, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think the more the merrier, right? So I have postcards of my books and of several of my books. And so on the front of the postcard is a picture of the book. On the back of the postcard, it looks like a postcard, and it has a QR code that sends them to Amazon, and it has the book title and the subtitle, and then it has space, white space, like when you go to Mount McKinley and you buy a postcard and you send it to your mom, right? There's that space. So obviously there's the space for the name and the address. And on the left side, my assistant will write, if you'd like a complimentary copy of this book, send me an email. That's it. So we send 5 of those a day to divorce attorneys all around the country. And so that's part of my assistant's job, is to identify divorce attorneys. And she's looking for collaborative divorce attorneys specifically. So sending those postcards out saying, and certified divorce financial advisors. So sending those postcards out, we get a good bit of them that say, sure, I'll take a copy of this book. So we mail them the book. And then they go on our list. We've sent you your book. Now we're going to communicate with you. And so I have a monthly divorce newsletter. I write for the Huffington Post divorce section. And so I send content that divorce attorneys would find helpful to send on to their clients. Because a lot of times I can say things that they can't say.
Yeah. Okay, so this is good. So I want to walk through this process step by step. So number one, it basically sounded like you identified whoever that target audience would be, or in this case, kind of that segment, who would be interested, obviously, in this book. So divorce attorneys, collaborative divorce attorneys, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
2, you're then going out and essentially doing kind of some sort of combination of list scraping or research and compiling of these people's contact information.
Yep.
3, you're sending out a physical postcard. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then in that postcard, the call to action is, if you'd like a free copy of this book, let us know.
Yeah.
How do you actually word that? And what's gotten a good response for
That's what
for
she
you?
says. If you'd like a complimentary copy of If Divorce is a Game, These Are the Rules, please send me an email. That's it.
Awesome. And what do you track this in terms of like response rates?
She has a spreadsheet, and we talk about the statistics, but the statistics are high.
Yeah.
Because if you have the right mindset, and so what's interesting is the Collaborative Law Institute of Texas had me do the keynote speech. Now here's the other side of my business, right? I do business development training, motivational speaking. And so they actually love my book. And then they said, well, would you come teach attorneys how to develop their business? Because you can't say to someone, okay, look, you've had 10 great years with your spouse, but she's old news. It's time to get a new one. It's time for a divorce, right? So you cannot instigate a divorce. You can't initiate a divorce for someone. You have to be top of mind when it's time for someone to be a divorce, to get a divorce. And so I did a training at their annual conference around how they could position themselves up to and including using the book to position themselves. Because when someone goes in to their business attorney's office and is like, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm getting a divorce, do you have a recommendation for a divorce lawyer? What you want them to do is turn around and go, yes, I do. And here's a book from the divorce attorney I recommend. Their information is on the back, and here's a book that they give out.
Awesome. Okay. And I think this is a really important piece to it, because you're immediately getting in front of your audience, and the people that obviously would be most likely to buy this stuff in bulk. And what are your results from something like that? For example, like if you went to do that presentation, and do people come up to you at the end of that and say,
oh, sure,
that's awesome?
Yeah. So I sold a lot of books after that, and I've had a number of people are in different steps of the process of doing the vanity printing, because the white labeling printing, right? I call it vanity printing. But the first step is they have to read and like the book, and that takes a minute, right? They have to make sure that the woman on stage and the woman in the book all in alignment with their values, and then they have to get their stuff. So I have one guy who paid me like $5,500 a year ago, and he still hasn't gotten me his stuff to do his printing. He's like, oh, I got to do my logo, and I haven't finished that. And so getting them to follow through, it's like, okay.
Yeah, it's not a bad problem to have on your end, I suppose.
It's not a bad problem. No, I just leave the money sitting there. I don't spend any of it until they actually get their books, but that's either here or there. So
sure. Okay.
But
go on.
It doesn't take very long once they decide what they want on the back cover. So it's making sure that they like what's on the back cover. So it goes to my designer, it comes back, they get to review the proof. And then we upload the files to the printer, and the printer ships direct to the attorney or the financial advisor.
What's the average number, or not, average is not always most appropriate, but what's the range of bulk orders you get if you do this?
The first one is usually between 500 and 1,000. And so what was interesting was what I learned the first go around. Like in my first, year doing this was I would call people and say, how's it going? And they'd say, oh, I've given out 12 books. And what I recognized was that a book in a box was not helping anybody.
Right.
It wasn't raising the profile of the attorney. So they were getting them and then they were handing them out like they were precious diamonds. And I was like, wait a minute, you've already paid for the book. So the money's gone. You have to get these books in motion. So I wrote a manual to go along with their vanity printing. It's like, here's all the ways you can use your book. Here's all the ways you can give away your book. So put it in your signature and put an opt-in page on your website. They're like, what's an opt-in page, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because most people, the civilians, right, not in the publishing space.
Yep.
Or internet marketing space, they don't know what a list is. And they're like,
right.
a list? I need a list of what? A grocery list? Right? So it's educating them on things like Aweber or MailChimp or so. It's like, you have to have a newsletter, and on the newsletter, you have to market your stuff and blah, 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 right? So have a page on your website where people can opt in to get a copy of the book. And then you want to go out and you want to, so part of business coaching and executive coaching for me is teaching people to develop relationships with people who are in business and do business with people who are their ideal customer, but are not in competition with them. So going to their strategic partners and saying, here are 10 copies of my book. If anyone ever mentions the word divorce to you, would you kindly pass on a copy of this book to them for me? So, initiating that. So give away your books, get rid of them. And so once I started doing that, then people started using them more often.
So I'm sorry. Yeah. So take me through this again, because I'm a little slow sometimes, and I'm trying to, piece this together and think, okay, how can I use this? I love this strategy. So when you were encouraging these lawyers to use it as a calling card, what was the instructions you gave them in terms of like how do you find the right people to give it to, for in their case?
So this is a little business coaching. This will be our business coaching module of this conversation.
Perfect.
So when I'm working, let's say I'm working with a corporate attorney.
Yep.
A corporate attorney would have a strategic partner with an insurance agent, a banker, a financial advisor, a CPA, right? So they would find people in other professions that have their same ideal client profile. So that's how you get business, right? Someone will say, a CPA will say, oh, I have this client. They need to form a corporation. Mr. Corporate Attorney, can you handle that? Client, meet corporate attorney. He's going to handle the formation of your company, right? Mm-hmm. That's referral from a strategic partner to another strategic partner. With divorce attorneys, their strategic partners are all other people in business, are all other business professionals who have clients who could possibly go through a divorce. So the instruction to the divorce attorneys is go to each of your strategic partners, people who would have your ideal divorce client, and give them 5 or 10 copies of your book. And when someone says, I'm going through a divorce, my wife left me, my husband left me, I'm getting married, I need a prenuptial agreement, right? Anything like that, anything around marriage or divorce, say, oh, well, maybe this book is appropriate for you because you're getting divorced, or this book is not appropriate for you because you're getting divorced. But the guy on the back, he's awesome. He can handle those marital agreements, premarital agreements, divorce papers, modifications, child support modification, visitation modification. He can handle that for you. And here's a book that he recommends. Go ahead and take this. And his information's on the back.
Awesome. Very cool. So I love that, because I think that's a very important piece to all this, because part of it, I think, as I look at this, I think to myself, part of the challenge here is if I'm proactively reaching out to people to potentially negotiate maybe a bulk book order, whether it's white labeled or not anyway, I sometimes part of that is going to be the education piece, is how do you actually take bulk orders and use them appropriately. Right.
Correct. Right. So you don't ever want someone to buy a bunch of your books and then not follow up with them and not help them to move those books. You want it's like money in motion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Your money won't do anything if it's under your mattress. You want it to be in motion.
Yep.
And so you want your books to be in motion. That's why when I have books in a box, like whenever I go on a trip, I take a little box of books with me. And whenever I stop at a Starbucks, I put them in the Starbucks.
Oh,
in
that's
the little,
cool.
Like where the newspapers go. Anytime I go somewhere, I'm dropping my books off. Like I spent 3 days in the hospital with my mother-in-law last week. So every day I showed up at the hospital, there's People magazine and there's newspapers and then there's Honoree's books on the table.
I love it. Have you ever, okay, on that note then, has anybody found you through that and like said, oh, I found your book at like a Starbucks?
Oh, sure.
That's
Absolutely.
So fun. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's very, it's guerrilla marketing for books.
Well, it's like if you don't have your book in bookstores, the old method was to take your book and put it in a bookstore. So when someone went to the front and said, I want to buy this book, they're like, this book isn't in our system.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be Barnes and Noble.
Exactly. So this was us. These books have all been self-published or published through your publishing company, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So have you actually, the fact that you're selling 5 or 1,000, bulk order these things, is this a book that has shown up in Barnes and Noble or any physical bookstores?
Sure. So now I print my books, just the one and done downloads, right, that are available through Amazon. I do them through CreateSpace. And so you can go to your Barnes and Noble and you can order any of my books through Barnes and Noble for sure.
Cool.
They may not stock it. I'm not cool. I'm not one of the cool kids, right? I'm not one of the big 5. So if you're not a big 5, they're not going to prominently display your book in the front unless you're a unicorn and lightning strikes. But so far I haven't had any lightning strikes, but I get rain. I'm making the rain. So that's good. That's good. It might happen at some point. I got a call from someone the other day wanting to talk to me about publishing Vision to Reality, which is one of my books commercially, and the deal wasn't good enough for me. But at some point you might get some interest. I might get some more interest. We'll see what happens.
Cool. Well, I've taken up a lot of your time on this, so what I want to do is shift focus to Prosperity for Writers. Tell me a little bit about this book and why you wrote it.
Sure. So I'm a writer and I make money from my writing. And not too long ago, in April of 2015, I went to the Colonist Summit, which was hosted by Sean Platt and Johnny B. Truant of the Self-Publishing Podcast. There was an interesting theme in the room. There were the people who were making money from their writing, and there were the people that really wanted to and that were really struggling. And their mantra was, I'm working at a job I hate, a soul-killing job. I'm not making any money from my writing. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and I don't know what to do right, and I don't know if I'm ever going to make any money from my writing. And they just felt very defeated to me. And I knew that with a few simple shifts in their psychology and their mindset, they would be able to make money from their writing. And so I was inspired to write. So the conference was 2 days. So I woke up on Sunday morning, the second morning, and I thought, what if I wrote a book on how to make money as a writer? Not the technical pieces of it, right? Not the doing the white labeling, not how to get your book onto Amazon, not any of that stuff, because that's been done. Lots of people have talked about that stuff, right? But the mindset piece, no book, just like there was no manual for single moms, there was no manual for writers on what their mindset needed to be like. And so I did a class called Prosperity for Writers with the intention of writing the book, but I like to prove the concept first. I'm someone who thinks there are a lot of books out there written by people who want to be successful, so they write a book about how to be successful, right? As opposed to being successful and then writing about it after they've lived that for a while. So I wanted to make sure that what I thought to be true was actually true, that something that I was living, that other people, if they were given the roadmap, could create success. And so I did a class, Prosperity for Writers, which is now a course. It's available on Gumroad, right? And then I wrote the book Prosperity for Writers. And I had the stories from the people who took the class, because that was my condition. You can't take my class unless you're going to be okay with people hearing you talk on the audio recordings, and I can talk about you in my book. And I had people say, of course, I would love to do that. And so we did that. So then I wrote the book. And then I also interviewed people who were making serious money from their writing, such as Sean Platt and also Steve Scott, who does very well with his habit stacking books. And just got into their heads about what was the shift like if they ever had to make it from I'm never going to make money from my writing to I'm going to make money from my writing, and here's how I'm going to do it. So I have some prosperity practices, some mindset shifts that people need to make in order to believe they can make money from their writing. And then I also am practical Susie, right? Anyone who knows me is like, okay, we're going to rely on luck for about 10 minutes and then we're actually going to get busy and make our feet match our lips. And so there's a lot of actual practical to-do items in that book, which is why I'm coming out with the companion productivity journal in a few weeks, because people are writing me and saying, I'm marking up my book. Like, I need something else. And so I'm going to do the Prosperity for Writers. I'm in the process actually of doing it right now, the Prosperity for Writers productivity journal. So there are spaces for them to write down their answers to the questions and to do the activities in the book and keep track of their progress.
Awesome. Very cool. So, and how is this, what's the reception to this book and to this content that you're creating?
It hasn't been out of the top 20 in the main category for the book.
Nice.
Since it was published. It's been amazing. This book is the fastest selling book right out of the gate, and it continues to be a bestseller. And it's interesting, I started a private Prosperity for Writers mastermind on Facebook, which anyone can join, right? Anybody who wants to make money from their writing can join that group. And I have people in there who are making money and people who want to make money, and everyone's really helpful. And you know how groups will say, like, don't promote yourself and we don't want you to talk about yourself, and, you know, keep it very much about me, the person who started the group. I want to promote myself, but God forbid you should promote yourself. I'm like, promote yourself.
Yep.
Tell us what you're working on and what you want to make money from your writing on, and let us support and encourage you. So I've been overwhelmed, honestly, with how people have received the book and how people have encouraged me to keep writing in that particular area.
How'd you go about releasing the book then? Tell me a little bit about that. It obviously has done pretty well if it stayed in the top, or very well if it stayed in the top 20 in select categories and stuff like that on Amazon. Maybe, and also if you're afraid to divulge some numbers too, anything like either, you know, daily sales on average or anything like that. But you don't have to get into that if you don't want. But I would definitely be curious in terms of how you did how you conducted your book launch.
Well, the people who I interviewed for the book, I mean, here's something that's a secret that's not so secret. If you want people to promote your book, interview them for your book. Right? So I've been on all the cool kids podcasts, right? I've been on the self-publishing podcast and the Creative Pen podcast and the Sell More Books show. And there are others that I've been on about the Author Strong podcast. So when you're on the podcast, the people who are your audience are listening. And so they're going and buying the book, and then they're telling their friends. And it's interesting because even at church, my minister made a big deal about the book. And there were several people that came up to me and said, oh, my daughter's a writer, or my sister's a writer, or my niece is a writer. Can I buy the book from you to pass it on? So I'm finding people are sharing it. I think my worst sales day has been 20, and my best sales day has been just over 3,800.
Wow. And what do you know, when you priced, what is this thing priced at right now? Like, how do you approach the pricing process for your book?
I did $4.99 for the ebook and $9.99 for the paperback. It's actually mid-range for an ebook and low end for the paperback, because I didn't want someone who wasn't making money from their writing because they're struggling to go, well, I can't afford a $15 book. If I could afford a $15 book, I wouldn't need to write your book. I would need to read your book. So I wanted to make it so that it would be easy to purchase and give away.
Yeah.
Or that someone could buy 2 copies and get a buddy, so they could have an accountability person to help them in the process. And the journal will be somewhere in that same price range. Cool.
Very cool. That's awesome. Very, very exciting to hear that. And so I guess, I guess I could go on and on asking more questions, but I've already taken up quite a bit of your time. So I'd like to maybe hand it off to you and say, first and foremost, I guess, where can people check out your work and follow you and buy some of your books and stuff like that? What's the best place to head over to?
Well, the point of entry would be honoreecorder.com. If they want my first book, Tall Order, for free, then they would go /free tall order, and they can get a copy of my first book for free. If they want the first 2 chapters of Prosperity for Writers, then they could go to honoreecorder.com/writers. Then it was funny when I said to my assistant, what should that URL be? It's like, let's not make it complicated. So just /writers. And then my books are everywhere books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Kobo, libraries, all that stuff. And on social media, I'm just Honoree. So HONOREE on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And I love connecting with readers, and I love it when someone writes to me and says, hey, I read your book and now I'm quitting my job because I'm making money from my writing. Like, those are the testimonials I'm getting. And the book is just 2 months old. I mean, it's just amazing.
Awesome. Great. And then any last parting pieces of advice for the author, self-publisher, or indie publisher just starting out, trying to grow their platform and I guess essentially become successful either self-published authors or successful indie publishers?
This is it's the long game. Mm-hmm. There's no overnight instant success. It's not microwave popcorn or, instant coffee. That if you want this to be your career, then this is something you would plan to do for many years to come. And so get into a good practice, a daily practice of writing. And there is no one book. Like, everyone's like, what's your favorite book? And I'm like, all of them, because I don't cherish one book. I don't rely on one book. Does that make sense? People, like, they write their first book and they're like, shoo, I'm glad that's over. It's like, you need to write at least 3 books. And then when you've written 3 books, then write 10 books. And if you've written 10, then write 20. Mm-hmm. So just keep writing. If you're writing because you must, right? Writers write because they must, for the love of writing, for the love of telling a story, or for helping people, right? Nonfiction or fiction. And so just be willing to put in the time that it takes, and be willing to work your plan and learn about marketing and learn about, the finer points of self-publishing. Have a good editor, have good artwork, have a team of people that help you, and just, when you feel like you're ready to give up, just give it, one more day. Yep. Right? And eventually you're going to wake up one day and go, hey, you know what? I'm making a living from my writing, and this is really cool. I mean, just when you're ready to give up, consider the alternative, right? Giving up and going back and doing what you don't want to do.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, great stuff, Honoree. I really appreciate it. Excellent. I'll make sure that's all linked up in the show notes and people can find your work. And I hope they do go to check it out. And really wonderful interview. I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And that wraps up another broadcast of In the Trenches. If you'd like to check out the show notes, just head over to tommorkes.com/podcast, where you'll find the latest broadcast. And if you enjoyed today's broadcast, please do me a favor and leave a rating and review on iTunes. That's the fastest, simplest, easiest way to support my creative work, and it would really mean a lot to me. As always, this is Tom Morkes, and if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.